The movie begins with the narrator speaking about the Indo-Pakistan War in 1971. Superpowers such as America and China were behind the civil unrest in Pakistan. The Pakistanis, motivated by the political support of the superpowers, were committing acts of cruelty in the eastern parts of their country where the Bangladeshis lived. This caused a lot of migration to India. After getting no help from world governments, India declared war to stop the migration of Bangladeshis to her country. This is the story of two martyrs from both countries. The first scene starts in Georgia, where the Pakistan UN peacekeeping forces led by Colonel Amal Raja Akram are traveling in a car. They reach an ambush point prepared by armed insurgents. The insurgents opened fire, and a shootout between the insurgents and the UN peacekeeping forces ended. After exchanging a few shots, the peacekeeping force members realize they are pinned down, and they call for backup. Surprisingly, an Indian UN peacekeeping force was near the area and rescued them from the attack. After they escape an attack, the leader of the Indian UN peacekeeping forces, Colonel Mahadevan, scolds Colonel Ajmal for walking into the ambush. But Colonel Ajmal, amazed by the irony of the events, kept grinding because of the shared animosity between Pakistan and India. It is revealed that Colonel Raja's battalion, 135 Frontier Force, and Colonel Mahadevan's battalion, 33 Grenadiers, fought a war 46 years ago. Colonel Raja expresses his gratitude to Colonel Mahadevan, who invites him and his army to a special event where they honor UN peacekeeping forces. Colonel Raja accepts the invitation. At the event, Colonel Mahadevan makes a great speech stating that humanity supersedes everything, and the soldiers have no quarrel with each other. Colonel Raja asked to make a small speech, which he is allowed to do. He expresses his gratitude to the 33 Battalion for the huge respect they showed to Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad Akram Raja, who was killed in the Indo-Pakistan War in 1971. Colonel Raja reveals Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad Akram Raja was his father. He mentions his father's body was recovered with a letter inside his pocket. The letter recognized his father's bravery, which he suspects was put there by the officer who killed him. Upon hearing this, Colonel Mahadevan reveals that it was his father, Major Shadevna, who killed Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad Akram. He apologizes to Colonel Raja, but Colonel Raja is not hurt, but rather thrilled to hear that Colonel Sahadevan is alive and well after all those years. The next scene shows us a retired Brigadier General Sahadevan paying his respects in front of the tombstone of two army officers next to each other. One was Indian and the other Pakistani. The name of the Pakistani officer was Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad Akram Raja, and the name of the Indian was Second Lieutenant Chinmay. This was his ritual, and this time, he had come with his family. One of his grandkids started to ask him why he paid his respect to the Pakistani soldier, stating Pakistan was the enemy. Sahadevan tells him both originate from the same lands, and he starts to tell them his story of war. The next scene takes us back to 1971, when Major Sahadevan was a young and strong man. Long before the war started, Major Sahadevan was a family man respected by the community, who was eccentric and enjoyed having a drink and participating in the traditional festivities in India. In the evening, he tells his wife about hearing there may be a war coming, which concerns him because he may have to leave his family for a long time. Meanwhile, somewhere in Pakistan, Lieutenant Colonel Raja is seen waiting at a hospital. He receives news that his wife is pregnant and he is about to become a father. He is delighted to hear the news, but war is coming for his country. On their way home, he confesses to his wife about hating war against the land he was born on and killing people, but he does it because he is a soldier. His wife tells him she understands, and they go home. India has declared war on Pakistan, and all military officials are called to battle. Major Sahadevan prepares to go to war. He bids his family and wife farewell and leaves for battle. And the same goes for Lieutenant Colonel Raja. He says goodbye to his wife and unborn child as he goes to war. Both reach their military camp and rally their troops with motivating speeches for war. Both men target Basantar Bridge's head. Lieutenant Colonel Raja motivates them by getting his men ready to be martyrs, but Major Sahadevan tells his men to believe they can come back and celebrate. Before the war starts, Major Sahadevan is joined by two major groups. The first group was led by Captain Adi Selvan. He was accompanied by Sudarshan, an Indian who had never fought a war and joined the army for financial sustenance, and two other soldiers. The second group was led by Second Lieutenant Chinmay. He and his men's specialty was operating tanks. They were sent to provide dedicated armory support for the infantry, since advancing to Basantar was difficult as the road was full of mines. Major Sahadevan calls Second Lieutenant Chinmay to his tent to give him the letter sent from his girlfriend. Before giving him the letter, he scolds him by telling him to get his mind ready for battle and not to entice himself with thoughts of a girl. Major Sahadashev starts to advance to Basantar. He meets with civilians and helps them clear out of the war zone. He also observes soldiers of previous battalions who are wounded. The one thing that gave hope to the soldiers was the letter they received from their families. Sudarshan, particularly, is happy because he received an encouraging letter from his father, whom he didn't have a great relationship with. His father told him to be brave and fight for his country. Major Sahadashev also thinks about the happy moments with his family and friends. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Raja motivates his soldiers on the coming battle, telling them about how the army led by Major Sahadashev is very brave and not to be taken lightly. The next day, the war starts, and the Pakistanis launch an attack on all fronts. The Indians were not prepared, and they faced defeat. The Pakistanis took many prisoners of war and killed one Sudur Shan. The news reaches Major Sahadashev, and they organize a ceremony and burn his body. The outcome seems to be on the Pakistani side, as more sad reports await Major Sahadashev and his soldiers. Major Sahadashev shares another sad news with Captain Adiselvan. He told him that Sudur Shan's father had fallen ill and was taken to hospital. Major Sahadashev personally sends Captain Adiselvan to console his father. Major Sahadashev is called to a meeting with Indian intelligence officers. The intelligence officers inform the military officials that they have intercepted America's 7th Naval Fleet and are on their way with India as their target. This indicates America has joined the war and has chosen a side. They describe the 7th Fleet as having 75,000 tons of nuclear power and cruise missiles, while India's best fleet carries only 20,000. Additionally, they also report that England and China are also prepared to attack with warships and military aircraft. They advise only one course of action, and that is to surrender. Angry with the reports of the intelligence officers, Major strongly disagrees with them. He mentions the Vietnam War, where the inferior Vietnamese fighters defeated the United States. He strongly declares they will fight until death, but never surrender. After hearing his speech, the Indian troops rally with him. At the prisoner camp of the Pakistanis, the Indian war prisoners were being tortured by the Pakistani army. At the same time, Lieutenant Colonel Raja notices and reprimands his senior officer in the Pakistan army as he violates the Geneva Convention, which states that prisoners of war should be treated as guests with their basic human rights intact. Unhappy with Lieutenant Colonel Raja's comments, he executes every prisoner of war. This makes Lieutenant Colonel Raja angry. He leaves the scene unable to do anything about it. Back in Major Sahadashev's camp, some of the Indian soldiers were about to do the same thing the Pakistanis did to the Indians, but Major Sahadashev quickly gave an order not to harm any prisoners of war, stating killing is only permitted on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Capitan Adiselvan arrives at the hospital to console Sudur Shan's father. Before the captain could state his reasons, the hasty nurse quickly takes him to Sudur Shan's father. The father held Sudur Shan's hand, believing it to be his son's until his dying moments. Captain Adiselvan stays with the dying father until he passes away. Major Sahadashev calls 2nd Lieutenant Chinmay and his men to lead the way in front of the infantry. Lieutenant Chinmay, along with his friends, arrive in their tanks and successfully clear the minefield. This allows the infantry to launch a successful attack, and they end their day in victory. On the same night, Major Shadashev and 2nd Lieutenant Chinmay sit on the tank and speak about their day, and Major Shadashev applauds the young soldier's actions by recommending him for a gallantry award. 2nd Lieutenant Chinmay invites Major Shadashev to try and drive the rank, and the major impresses the soldiers with his skills. He then gives him letters from his girlfriend to use as a relief from the stress of the desert. As Lieutenant Chinmay was reading the letter, he floated with memories of his time with his girlfriend in his village. The next day, Lieutenant Colonel Raja gives an order in conflict with his superior, which is to inform one of the soldiers about the death of his mother and send him away to attend the funeral. On the battlefield, the Indians are still advancing with the help of 2nd Lieutenant Chinmay and his operatives in the tank. The Pakistanis fled, thinking there was a whole army chasing them behind them. They chased the Pakistani tanks alone, launching attacks as they followed them. They managed to destroy 6 tanks, but after being chased for a while, the Pakistani tanks stopped and turned around to see there was only one tank. They corner the Indian tank from all 4 sides and launch an attack. The 3 operatives inside died quickly as they were hit with repetitive attacks. 2nd Lieutenant Chinmay makes his last stand with a handgun and is eventually killed. Lieutenant Colonel Raja recognizes this martyrdom by the young soldier. After seeing his face, he remarks that a young man with little to no battle experience destroyed 6 tanks. Amazed by the heroics of this young soldier, Lieutenant Colonel Raja declares a temporary ceasefire to let the Indians get the body of 2nd Lieutenant Chinmay. This further infuriates the Pakistani superior officer, who wants to violently punish every Indian he gets his hands on, but the order is carried out nonetheless. Major Sahadashev, who heard on the radio that the Indian tank was being attacked, reached the place late after the Pakistanis had left. He is devastated to see the body of the young soldier. He rides on the tank along with the body of the young soldier. After they reach a temporary stop, he orders the soldiers to leave to prepare the body to burn, but not to set it on fire, as that honor was his. One of the soldiers argues against leaving the body out in the open, but Major Sahadashev has already decided. Now the Indians launch one full attack at the Battle of Basangar. Major Sahadashev sends the 2 other captains in his battalion on 2 different fronts. He sends Captain Adiselvam to the left flank and Captain Anand to the right, while he and his troops go through the front. Major Sahadashev uses the medium machine gun, which fires consecutive rounds without stopping for a long time, to kill most of the Pakistani army, which gives a good cover cover for his soldiers on foot. Now, the two prominent military leaders with their respective battalions come face to face, and a long battle ensues. Both used brilliant strategies, but there was a huge number of casualties from both sides. At last, both Major Sahadashev and Lieutenant Colonel Raja engage in hand-to-hand combat, which Sahadashev wins as he stabs and kills his opponent. This marked the end of the war. Pakistan surrenders unconditionally, and the ceasefire is declared. Major Sahadashev writes a letter honoring Lieutenant Colonel Raja's bravery, which would be later discovered by his family. Major Sahadevan is disturbed by the deaths of the Indian soldiers and the Pakistani soldiers. After seeing the carnage brought by the war, he resolves that there should be no more wars, as it leads to death and destruction. Then, he goes to bury the dead, including Chinmay, and decides to walk the rest of the way. The movie brings us back to the present, with Major Sahadashev walking with his grandkids, telling them about the two soldiers he just visited. He reveals that the Pakistan government awarded Lieutenant Colonel Raja with the highest gallantry award of the country, and Second Lieutenant Chinmay was honored with Param Veer Chakra, which is the highest military decoration awarded for the highest degree of valor or self-sacrifice in the presence of the enemy, making him the youngest recipient of the award. The movie ends with Major Sahadashev walking out of a cemetery with his grandchildren, including the young boy who was asking questions at the beginning of the movie named after the young soldier, Chinmay. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.